The first sign something was catastrophically wrong came when Rachel pulled into her driveway. She had just returned from a weekend camping trip. She saw a brand-new 6-foot privacy fence cutting directly through her apple orchard. The massive fence completely severed 15 mature trees from her property. It also blocked access to the expensive irrigation system that had taken her 3 years to properly install. The fence was undeniably professional grade. It was made of thick cedar planks with decorative post caps. It was the kind of structure that cost serious money and required serious planning. This meant it wasn't some overnight mistake or a simple property line confusion. This was deliberate, calculated, and orchestrated by none other than Madeline Kensington. Madeline was the wealthy HOA president who had been making Rachel's life completely miserable for years. The harassment started ever since Rachel refused to remove her vegetable garden. Madeline claimed it violated the community's strict estate standards, which supposedly required only ornamental landscaping. Madeline lived in the absolute largest house in Maplewood Estates. It was a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion that dominated the hilltop like a fortress. It came complete with imported Italian tile and a huge 4-car garage. Neighbors constantly whispered about her massive, unpermitted guest house. Madeline claimed it was just a very large pool cabana, despite it having a full kitchen and 2 bedrooms. Rachel stood there staring at the new fence. She stared at the structure that had literally stolen half her orchard. Her hands shook with a rage so intense she could feel her pulse hammering in her temples. This wasn't just about property lines or HOA overreach anymore. This was about Madeline deciding she wanted to expand her backyard entertaining space. She was simply taking whatever land she needed. She hid behind her HOA authority, assuming nobody would have the resources or courage to fight back. She assumed no one would challenge someone with her extreme wealth and connections. The thick fence posts were already sunk deep in solid concrete. This meant the structure wasn't temporary in the slightest. There were already landscapers on Madeline's side, installing new sod and decorative shrubs. They were working like the land had always belonged to her. Rachel immediately pulled out her phone and called the local police. The officers showed up and quickly looked at the county property records. They confirmed that the fence was absolutely on Rachel's deeded land. But then they delivered some incredibly soul-crushing news to her. They explained that this was strictly a civil matter. They couldn't force the removal of the fence without a judge's court order. That process could take months and cost tens of thousands of dollars in heavy legal fees. As a public school teacher, Rachel definitely didn't have that kind of money sitting in her savings account. Madeline appeared within minutes of the police leaving the property. She was dressed in pristine tennis whites. It was 7 in the evening, but she paraded around, carrying a thick folder of documents. She wore the exact kind of smug, arrogant smile that made Rachel want to scream. She presented what she called an emergency resolution. She claimed it was an HOA boundary adjustment resolution. The document looked highly official, complete with stamps and signatures. It claimed the board had voted to realign certain property lines to better serve the community. Madeline insisted it was for the community's overall aesthetic vision and property values. Rachel quickly snatched the document from her hands. She immediately spotted 3 glaring problems that made her instincts kick into overdrive. Before becoming a teacher, Rachel had worked for years as a professional paralegal. She knew exactly what legitimate legal documents looked like. First, the suspicious resolution was dated just 4 days earlier. But the fence had clearly been under construction for at least a full week, judging by how the concrete was curing. Second, the document claimed to have unanimous board approval. But Rachel personally knew 2 of the board members. Those 2 members were currently on a long vacation in Europe and had been gone for 10 days. Third, and this was the crucial detail that made Rachel's entire strategy click into place, the resolution referenced Madeline's property. It listed Madeline's property as Lot 17, containing 0.42 acres. But Rachel knew from her own previous title searches that Madeline's original deed listed the lot at only 0.38 acres. This tiny detail meant Madeline had already been quietly claiming land that wasn't hers for years. Rachel went straight home and pulled every single property document she owned. She started researching with obsessive focus. It was the kind of intense focus that only comes from being absolutely furious and having 2 weeks of summer break with nothing else to do. She soon discovered that county property records showed multiple glaring discrepancies. There were massive boundary issues going back 7 years. This was exactly when Madeline had done her major mansion renovation. And that extensive renovation was when things got really, really interesting. Rachel found the original building permits, and they didn't match the actual construction at all. The permits only showed a simple kitchen remodel and a basic bathroom addition. But satellite imagery told a completely different story. Google Earth's historical view clearly showed that Madeline had actually added an entire second-story addition. She had expanded the home's footprint by at least 800 square feet. And then there was the pool house. She had constructed that highly controversial pool house that was definitely not just a cabana. None of that massive additional construction appeared in any county permits whatsoever. This meant Madeline had made a huge mistake. She had either done it all completely without permits, or she had blatantly lied on the permit applications. Both of those actions were incredibly serious legal violations. They could easily result in massive, crippling fines. It could even lead to forced demolition and criminal charges, depending on what the inspectors found. Rachel quickly filed a single complaint with the county building department. It was a simple online form that took 15 minutes. It cost absolutely nothing to complete. She formally requested a comprehensive inspection of the property at Lot 17 in Maplewood Estates. She cited potential permit violations and severe boundary encroachments. She included satellite imagery, comparisons, and copies of the original building permits. She attached current property photos showing the obvious unpermitted additions. She also included a detailed timeline of the property expansions. The timeline perfectly coincided with Madeline's suspicious increase in power within the HOA. The county inspector, who showed up just 3 days later, was a tough veteran code enforcement officer named Inspector Frank Mitchell. Frank had seen every kind of construction fraud imaginable. He had a particular hatred for wealthy, entitled homeowners who thought building permits were just polite suggestions for poor people. He brought a whole team with him. He brought 2 assistants, a structural engineer, and enough measuring equipment to survey a small city. What they found during that grueling 8-hour inspection turned Madeline's property into a legendary cautionary tale. It would be told at county planning meetings for the next decade. The illegal, unpermitted additions totaled over 2,000 square feet of luxury living space. It had never been inspected and had never been taxed properly. It included dangerous electrical work that violated at least 14 different building codes and posed serious fire hazards. The famous pool house was actually a fully functional guest residence with plumbing and HVAC systems. It should have required separate permits, expensive impact fees, and proper utility connections. Instead, Madeline had illegally tapped into the main house's utilities to avoid detection. The property boundary survey was even worse. The survey revealed that Madeline had been encroaching on community common areas, county easements, and 3 separate neighbor properties for years. She had been stealing roughly 0.15 acres of land in total. She had simply fenced it off and beautifully landscaped it as her own private estate. The total violations came to 47 separate code infractions. Each individual infraction carried heavy fines ranging from $500. Some of the fines were up to $5,000 each. Plus, there were mandatory correction costs. She would be required to partially demolish the unpermitted additions, relocate utilities, and completely remove the illegal structures. She had to restore all the stolen land immediately. She had to give it back to its rightful owners or the HOA common areas. The county swiftly issued a strict stop-use order on the entire mansion. This meant Madeline and her family had to immediately vacate the premises. They had to find temporary housing while contractors spent 6 agonizing months bringing everything into compliance. The estimated cost was astronomical. The mandatory corrections and demolition would cost an estimated $370,000. The illegal fence running through Rachel's beautiful orchard came down within 48 hours. Madeline was forced to pay for professional arborist care for the damaged apple trees. She also had to pay hefty compensation. She was ordered to compensate Rachel for 3 years of projected lost fruit production. The HOA board convened and voted unanimously to strip Madeline of her presidency. Then, they ordered a complete forensic audit of the HOA finances. The audit revealed she had been using community funds to secretly pay for personal legal fees. This resulted in even more civil charges against her. Rachel's apple trees recovered beautifully the following spring, and Rachel made absolutely sure to send Madeline a delicious jar of homemade apple butter every single Christmas. It was delivered straight to the modest, cramped townhouse Madeline was forced to downsize to after the legal fallout. Her massive legal bills and fines completely bankrupted her renovation budget and utterly destroyed her credit. She lost everything, all because she decided she could steal a few extra feet of an apple orchard.